Because Supercar in the script had to fly, we needed aerial shots, background shots that we would put Supercar in front of, people looking out of the window of Supercar, so we had to have air to ground shots. And we hired a plane at the time, it was a twin-engine aircraft called Airspeed Oxford, and we went to meet it at White Waltham, and it landed, and because I'd been in the RAF, I looked at the windsock and I was horrified because it was landing downwind instead of into wind. And the pilot got out and said, "Oh, hi folks, sorry, I've got to go to the control tower for a to use his words, because I came in downwind." And I thought, yeah, and we're going to go up with you. But anyway, we went up with him and he took us up to 12,000 feet where you really need to have oxygen. But we had no oxygen masks. You can get oxygen starvation and start doing silly things like jumping out of the aircraft and believing you can fly, that sort of thing. But then John Reed was very distressed. He was on camera and he was gasping for breath, rather like a fish out of water. And I said, "John, what's the trouble?" And he said, "Gerry, I can't breathe, I've only got one lung." Well, I was shattered because I'd known him for a long, long time, but I didn't know this about him. So I rushed to the cockpit and said, "Quick, lose height, because my partner has only got one lung and he's suffocating." And the pilot said, "Well, I've got an engineer here who's got a cold, and if I descend, I'm going to blow his eardrums out." And so we circled for half an hour to come down in order to save John and the engineer. So, you know, that was a bit of excitement that we had.
Well, friend Zarin, and what do you think of that?
Oh, I liked it, Master Spy, very much. But I prefer westerns.
You fool.
And nothing else was on the horizon. And slowly the money ran out.
So here we were with a television studio around our necks, film technicians, thousands of pounds mortgaged, no work.
We were all sitting around. I'd phoned a friend of ours, Frank Sherwin-Green, who was a lovely man, producer. He'd given us work before for doing titles, and said to him, "Look, Frank, we're going out of business because Granada haven't come back to us, and they now don't want another series. And we've got overheads, we've got people we've got to lay off. Can you find us jobs?"
And we told him that we were going bust. And he said, "I mean, you can't do this, Gerry. I mean, look, you know, you've got a control room here. You actually built it with your own hands, and you've got your overhead bridges for the puppets, and you've got a projector and BP and all this sort of thing." And he said, "I can't bear the thought of you closing down."
So he didn't seem to understand that we were just the end of the line. There was nowhere else to go. And anyway, he came down that night, following night, with a bottle of gin or something. And we all sat round. It was like a wake, you know, in this empty, deserted studio. And he said, no, look, he said, "I've been thinking about what you've told me over the phone." He said, "I don't know. I said, I can't promise anything." He said, "But I think it might just work." "What's that?" "Well, I know someone."
He said, "I've got a friend called Connery Chapel, and he knows Lew Grade," who I'd never heard of.
And I said, "Who's Lew Grade?" And he said, "Oh, he's ATV." He said, "And he's going to be a big, big name in television."
He said, "I'll have a word. I'll see if I can't get you a meeting." Well, cut a long story sideways, as they say. He got me a meeting with Lew Grade.
And Gerry and Rachel had come up with an idea about a car that could do everything.
There she is, Mike. Supercar. 5 years' work, and now I think she's nearly ready.
I can't wait to fly her, Professor.
And I took this up to Lew Grade, and Lew was sitting behind his desk with this enormous cigar, and my voice was shaking from nerves, and I said, "You know, we'd like to make this television series. And he just flicked through, he didn't look at really, just flicked through the pages. And he said, how much is it going to cost? Well, let's say it was something like £3,000 an episode for the sake of this story. So I said to him, we've budgeted out and it'll cost £3,000 an episode. And he exploded.
Most interesting.
£3,000 an episode? I can't afford to pay you that. This is for a kids' series. What are you talking about? He looked at me and he could see that he'd, shaken me, and I was really quite frightened. And so he became very nice then. He's Uncle Lew now. And he said, look, Gerry, if you go back to your studio, he said, 5 o'clock now, if you come and see me tomorrow morning at 7:30 and tell me that you cut the budget in half, I'll give you an immediate contract for 26 pictures. Well, I drove back to the studio and all my partners said, well, you must be mad, Gerry. There's no way we can cut it in half. I said, well, it's either that or we go bust. So they said, well, we'll have a go. Well, we sat up all night and we cut everything down to the bone. And the thing I remember is that dawn was breaking and we hadn't cut it in half. And I remember saying, look, we've allowed for 4 cups of tea a day for the unit. What if we reduce that to 2? Anyway, I made my way to Lew's office, arrived 7:30 in the morning. He said, well, have you cut it in half? And I could actually feel my eyes welling with tears. And I said, Mr. Grade, I've been up all night and we've tried desperately. I said, we've cut 1/3 off the budget, but there's no way we could cut it in half. And he just said, okay, you've got a series. Just like that.
We will help ourselves to Supercar.
And of course, I was overwhelmed. And then walking out, having thanked him, I thought, if we've got to start production immediately, because that's what he told me to do, we've got to have money to go into pre-production. So I turned back and said, Mr. Grade, is it possible for you to let me have a letter of intent?
And Lew Grade went mad. He said, what? You're asking me for something in writing? My word is my bond. Don't you know that? Well, we didn't know it because we'd never heard of him before.
My word is better than any contract or agreement you could ever get drawn up. Now, get out of here and make the series. Well, I went back. Of course, once again, my partner said, we must be mad to go here without a contract. But, within 4 days, we got an agreement. It was beautifully drawn up, very simple to understand. It was very, very fair. And we went into production. And that's how I met Lew. If we replayed the scene today, what would have happened would be Lew would have said, okay, thank you for the brochure. I'm going to hand this to my head of production. I'll get a report in probably 2 weeks' time, and then we'll look through the budget and see, go through item by item, and if it's all right, then we'll have another meeting and we may then possibly commission a series. Now, what he did was he eliminated all the accountants, he eliminated the time it would take, and he knew that he got the series for rock bottom price. And that was the genius of the man. I mean, okay, he cut the budget down, but we managed to do it, and it saved us, and it started a brilliant career for me. So no complaints at all.
What is it?
Well, we call it Supercar.
Supercar? Boy, is that it?
Yeah, that's it. I'm glad you like it, Jimmy boy, because as soon as you're well enough, you're coming up with me for a ride in it.
It was a family show. The characters were, of course, Dr. Beaker, who was very terribly British, played by David Graham, who later on played the voice of Parker in Thunderbirds.
And I'll be with you in a moment, pilot. Rome wasn't built in a day, you know. Satisfactory. Most satisfactory.
Mitch the monkey.
Mitch, come down here.
He used to screech all the time and drive us all around the bend. And then there was the hero, Mike Mercury.
Now listen, Professor, what better way to test out the supercar than by rescuing those kids from the sea?
Grade and Gould, yes, yes. He was great for us because he had this sort of right quality voice.
One of us has got to try and sneak back to the supercar.
Oh, I think that would better be you, Mike.
Yeah, I think so too, Dr. Beaker, and I'll tell you why. First, I'm probably better at running, so I stand a better chance of dodging an arrow. Now, my idea is to get back to Supercar and bring her over here.
I remember we used to have trouble. Canadians are from Scotch-Irish descent, usually, and they can't say out. They say oot. Everything is oot. O-U-T is oot. So I know with the Grade, I said, no, Graydon, you're saying oot instead of out. He said, I thought I'd said it. I said, no, you haven't. No, he was very good to work with. No, I liked him very much.
Help! Help! Please help me.
Alas, Miss Farnsworth, as we warned you, these things are not to be trusted. Goodbye, Miss Farns.
He was a great gambler. So in between takes, or even when we were actually, he's writing out his bet or going to the phone, my memory of him is he was always having a bet or something, you know. So, no, it was good fun. And he was in, of course, he was in Crossroads to Crime. Yes, yes, he was quite a character. You quickly knew the voice artists that could do just one voice, maybe. But with David Graham, for example, I knew really the ones that could take on several voices. And they actually fought to do all the voices, really. You know, we had great fun.
You have the same car as you had before?
Jones, you've got the script, have you?
Yes, indeed, I have.
And have you read it?
I have. I think it's absolutely wonderful.
Oh, good. That's absolutely fine. Because everyone else is lined up in the cast. We want you to do the part.
Oh, that's magnificent. I can't wait to see you and discuss it.
So I did lots of guests. I could do American Ladies, you know, like that sort of thing. And then I did Jimmy, little boy's voice.
Oh, gee, thanks. Hey, I almost forgot. Where's Mitch?
Just try the gee, thanks. Without me.
Gee, thanks. Hey, I almost forgot. Where's Mitch? Gee, I sure am glad to hear that. Can I see him?
Yeah, a little more relief rather than excitement in that first line.
Gee, I sure am glad to hear that. Can I see him? Once more?
And I actually enjoyed it. I really enjoyed doing that because I felt I'm really doing something, you know.
Ooh la la la, c'est la vie pour Zizi. Ooh la la la, c'est la vie pour toi. I don't think that was so good. Didn't feel it.
I can remember I was playing two voices, the princess and Jimmy. Jimmy was rescuing the princess. So it was almost like a punishment that I had to edit those tapes between myself. And I can remember being in the studio late at night. You know, in those days, you just had a splicing thing and a sharp thing, and then you through the head of the machine to get the right pause. And I can remember there was only one other person working late that night, upstairs in the editing room, David Elliott, who was great stalwart of ours and from the very beginning, and he was an editor. And I'm going like this with the voice tape. He's upstairs doing the film stuff. And suddenly I thought, oh God, I'm hungry. So I walked into the kitchen. I never eat sandwiches as such. I never liked sandwiches. I like open sandwiches, but I don't like all these plonk things. So I found these sandwiches that seemed to be untouched, and I sort of carefully took the chicken out of them. I went back to work, and about an hour later, I heard David Elliott saying, "Blimey, who's taking the innings out of these sandwiches?" And I didn't own up. So when I saw him long after that, I said, "You know, I was the one." He said, "I thought it was. You didn't own up."
The Andersons were in the big time on an international scale, and it was no accident that many of their characters spoke with American accents.
There are two reasons. The first one is financial, is because our programs sold to America and went on the American networks, and this was quite unique at this time. And in order to do this, we had to have the characters Americanized, if you like, and speaking so that the American public would understand them, because this was before the British accent was the in thing.
The industry went through a period of having transatlantic accents, which I hated. We hated them over here, the Americans hated them over there. They just weren't a very good idea. But since we were making science fiction films about submarines that could go down to enormous depths, rockets that would be fired into space and go into orbit, and all of these, ultra high-speed aircraft and so on, it didn't make sense for us to try to claim that we in England were doing that.
In the early 60s, the British boffin was not a terribly glamorous character, not the way he is today. You had the British lawyer, the British doctor, rather stuffy. I don't really think the stuff that TV puppet heroes are made of.
We didn't have any British astronauts at the time, so it followed that they would be cast as American.
Can you imagine a broadcaster saying, "There's great excitement in this country at the moment because the first rocket going to the moon is being launched in Scunthorpe tonight"? Now, it would be laughable.
So we were really just doing it as we saw it. And of course, if Lew Grade could get a good sale out of it, that was good too.
We needed that money, the American money, for our programs. Although they were backed by ATV, we needed the American sale in order to make the sophisticated programs in the puppetry world that I believe we made, particularly in science fiction, special effects and so on.
At the time, if you put all the sales together over the whole world and added up the figure, America would pay a much larger figure for America than the whole world put together. If you took syndication in America, at that time there were 600 local stations, television stations, and we had 3 channels here. There's no comparison.
I know that Lew Grade was rather pilloried about this, because they said we were doing transatlantic stuff and everything. But of course that's where the money was, and that's where Lew Grade wanted to do the sales.
One has to remember that audiences in this country have been watching American films and American television for years, and nobody said, "Oh look, they're talking with an American accent." I mean, everybody was used to it. It didn't matter. But it was very good for us to do that.
Say, this tastes great, Jimmy.
Yeah, it's all certainly cornet with a new streamlined top.
Only threepence. Well, let's get some more.
In those days, merchandising, character merchandising, was practically non-existent in this country. It was very much an American thing, because they're always very good at marketing. And so we didn't realize, we weren't important enough at that point, really, for people to go and buy our stuff. But we had, Gerry had a friend called Keith Shackleton, who, they were in the RAF together in the National Service. So he joined. Keith started with the merchandising, and he realized that what he had to offer from our character marketing really wasn't sufficient to keep a marketing company going. So he went to America on his own initiative and spoke with a man called Stan Weston, who had actually invented G.I. Joe, which was a big marketing thing in America, and I think over here. And he was looking for product. So we did a swap, or Keith did. I have to say, it's all down to Keith. So we had Dr. Kildare on our books, and then in turn he took one of our shows. So that's how we started.
Okay, I'm alongside the raft. Vicar, I will turn the switch on the horizontal gyros. It will help hold him steady in the water.
Is that altogether wise, Professor?
What do you mean, Vicar?
It may cause Supercar to rotate in the water.
Poppycock!
I beg your pardon.
I said poppycock.
The puppets' hands were carved. Sometimes they were carved like that, or some if they're going to receive something like that. But what they couldn't do, we couldn't move the hand. And this was a big problem. So I came up with the idea of putting thin rubber gloves, surgical gloves, onto the hands of one of the crew. And then we would paint them to look the same colour as the puppets.
Good luck, Mike.
And we could then cut to a close shot where the hand came in. So combining the two shots, we were able to get it look like the puppet was picking up an object. And this became something that we did every day of the week because it worked quite well for us. And then Equity came on to us and said, we understand the crew are doing the hand shots. And I said, yes, that's right. And they said, well, you can't do that. You've got to have a hand artist. I said, look at all the puppets we've got. I said, well, you have to have a hand artist for each puppet. I mean, it was just crazy. But in actual fact, we had a discussion with Equity, and I think they could see what the problem was, and there was no problem. But it nearly came to blows at the time.
So far, so good. Selecting vertical takeoff now.
No chances now, Mike.
You know me better than that, Professor. Let her go, full boost.
And he had to build a model big enough so that the puppets could sit inside it. Built it by cutting out templates which formed the shape, balsa wood planks which he stuck very, very carefully and sanded it all down and then sprayed it. It was a real work of art. We then had to have a canopy, and it was the early days of plastics. And we went along to a plastic factory on the Slough Estates and said, here is the so-called plug, in other words, the inside of the canopy made of wood, and they stretched a sheet of plastic over the top, heated it, and then they sucked the air out from the bottom so that the plastic then bent and wrapped itself around the so-called plug. And when they lifted it off, we had a canopy. The only thing was that we did this about 6 times, because each time as they heated it, it would explode. And we got to the point where we'd spent so much money, we didn't know what to do. And they said, Gerry, we can't go on. You know, I mean, we spent a fortune on this. So I said, well, have one more try. And I remember the desperation of heating and sucking the air out, and it was all right. We had, in fact, had been living together for quite some time, and now and again she would say, well, aren't we going to get married? And I would say, yes, of course, but we can't do it at the moment. We were too busy. And eventually we found the time.
We dashed up to London. We didn't have a big wedding. We didn't have a honeymoon or anything. We dashed up, had lunch in Soho, where else? In the filmland, if you like.
I was driving back to the studio, and it was quite late, and on the grass in front of this little studio, I saw the water tank where the fire service had filled with water. They had Supercar on a line, and somebody was holding their breath, holding it underwater. They would release it and pull it out the water, and it wasn't working. So I said to my then wife, sorry, I'll be late. This is our marriage night. So I spent the night working outside, getting that particular shot. It's a very famous shot because everybody can see the line that was attached to Supercar and pulling it out of the water, but yeah.
And effects were just such an enormous part. I mean, we had to make up for the fact that our puppets didn't have expression. They couldn't walk. They couldn't stand up and sit down. They couldn't go through a door. So we had to make up with the music and the effects. That made it up, into a whole thing. Well, you see, the effects department was a fantastic team of blokes, who loved every minute of what they were doing, and nothing was impossible for them. And they improved as they went along, obviously. we'd write something in and think, oh God, I wonder if they can do that. And they never once said they couldn't do a shot. They always found a way of doing it. It was a challenge, you know. Because I think each series was a challenge to us.
Most satisfactory.
Sure, Dr. Beaker, I think you're... Hold it. There's trouble. The starboard engine's blown out. And the controls have jammed. We're going out of control. Tighten your safety belts.
Mike, there's only one chance. Fire the air brakes at 0 feet. It might just save us.
Roger, switching to clear view. Height 5,000 feet, descending 12,000 feet per minute. Stand by to fire air brakes.
Hold tight, Mitch.
Height 2,500, 2,000, 1,500, 1,000, 500, 400, 300, 200, fire!
You can't expect people to break their hearts over something made of fiberglass or something. So we had to make it. That's why we had top people doing the title songs, Barry Gray's music. And it really was our own ambitions coming out. We were determined to, if we were going to spend some time in a mucky studio, we wanted it to be something that we enjoyed and improved on. And then someone like Derek Meddings, who I haven't mentioned yet, an absolute genius, he really was.
Derek Meddings, who worked for another company when he was a lad, used to come into our company in the evening and paint sky backings.
And he was steeped in films, actually, because his mother was the secretary to Alexander Corder, who was in his heyday, was the Mr. Show Business in England. Made big epic films, Merlot Braun and all that stuff.
But then, of course, as we progressed, he joined us, and I then started our own special effects company, which he headed up. And of course, he then grew with the company.
I think it's important to know we all started on the same level, if you like. But people like Derek and our team were there, and they grew up with us, really. So that was the nice part about it all.
He was certainly a genius, there's no doubt about that. And he went on to major pictures afterwards, including Bond.
We owe so much to Derek. We really do. I mean, there was nothing, and I regret one thing with Derek. At the time, I regretted it, that Derek came in to ask Gerry if he could be part of the company, literally part of the company, and not just employed by us. And to me, it made great sense, and Gerry said no, and I think that's when Derek lost heart. Said, well, okay. And he went on to other things. And I think that was a terrible, terrible mistake, because no one could do more than Derek had done. And I felt that we owed that to him, but it wasn't to be, so. Writing's always been my thing, really and truly, you know. I was going to go to the London School of Journalism at one point, went to LSE instead. But no, writing, that was my thing at school and everything. Got a prize for journalism and so on. The way we worked, Gerry had the ideas, the adventure, the boy's own adventure, if you like. And I would do the human, if you like, which was puppet, of course. I do the characterization. Someone once told me in films, if something terrible happened, pulling the heartstrings, you first of all start off with an opening shot, and the man is saying goodbye to his wife and children, going to work. And you know it's a lovely family, a nice house, you know, lovely people. He goes into his office, bang, he's shot. Now, immediately you're intrigued. You care what's happening to him. And you've already established very quickly that he's a nice chap. Now you've got to go into all the details. That all stayed with me, that if you're going to have many explosions you've got, or anything, you've got to make your characters interesting. Otherwise, it doesn't doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't care. You don't care. So that's where I worked, if you like, humanizing, in a strange way, puppets, but putting them in a situation that's sympathetic, and then go from there. I think really what it was, Supermarionation, you know, puppets is a terrible label to have. Americans, whatever you do to puppets, it's still puppets to them. And if you look at the titles we had, it was like an old MGM title from musicals, you know. So we, again, you have to think of the era and how we were brought up on big musicals, MGM, Lion Roaring, all the rest of it. So we thought, God, we can't keep calling these puppets, because they're not really puppets in the true sense of the word. So I think it may have been Gerry, I'm not sure who, but we had a collective thing, that Supermarionation, it gave that big feel to it. You know, it was like an MGM production, really and truly. And I think it's one of the secrets we had, that we didn't treat them as if they were kids' things. And we didn't treat them like they were puppets. We said, look, we always wanted to do the big movies. Well, we're not doing them, but we're doing them with puppets, so we do the next best thing. And I think Supermarionation fills up the screen. It's good on the titles. And that was to say, this incorporates everything that we have developed, really, from the early days of Twizzle and so on, right through. So it incorporated everything, really. And that was a very interesting time, because we were totally owned by ourselves. We were employed by ATV to do these shows, but it was our company. So anything that came in, we fell or raised up just by our own initiative, but we didn't belong to anyone.
We finished Supercar, and we had an idea for the next series. The title was Fireball XL5, and I went to see Lew Grade.
Now, Lew, we didn't know very well, but he was very flamboyant, big cigar. He was like the old Hollywood sort of mogul, in the old Hollywood days.
Whenever I went to see him, he always wanted me there 7:30 in the morning. Always there was a silver tray, couple of coffee cups, silver coffee pot, and he'd pour 2 coffees, and he would give me one of his cigars, which, no exaggeration, was that long, and we'd both light up, and he used to fold his arms, sit back in his chair and say, well, Gerry, what's a new idea? And I would explain the idea to him, and he would listen intently, and then he would ask a couple of questions, and then he would think for a moment, and he'd say, okay, go ahead. And from then on, that's how every series was commissioned. And I did 16 years with him without a break. One production finished, I went straight on to the next, and the next, and the next, and the next.
It enabled us to grow up, if you like, and just make everything we hoped better, and to actually explore all the different things that we could do. I mean, you think of that Supercar and go back to Twizzle and Torchy, how far we'd come along, you know. So that was another leap that we made very, very quickly, the Supercar.